Hello, this is Hanin Salman. Today I'm sharing my presentation. As you can see, the title of the research is The Impact of Task-Based Language Teaching Approach on Developing Saudi EFL Learner Speaking Skills. In 2021, statistics showed that around 1.35 billion of people worldwide speak English language either as native speakers or as second language speakers, which means that the language has spread all over the world. Which led us to rethink of how language should be taught. Consequently, the language or English language is taught in many non-English speaking countries around the world, including Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, English language is taught as the second main language in classrooms, and the main approaches followed is the communicative language teaching approach. As you may know, communicative language teaching approach is one of the well-known approaches in developing learners' target language, which was based on the communicative competence theory, which was firstly introduced by Himes. Himes argued that there is a need to look at the appropriateness of the language used in a specific context. Language is used according to what the context is and what the reasons for the communicative function is. Which was developed in a response to Chomsky's theory, who argued that the ability to use mechanism of language is innate. And as we are born with language, it is used regardless of the context. Chomsky called this innate ability to use language universal grammar. However, Himes' theory argued that it is impossible to disconnect the language form from the context. Instead, it is necessary to consider how to speak, to whom, and in what manner. So this research is examining the effect of an approach called task-based language teaching, which was developed as a version of communicative language teaching approach. TBLT, or task-based language teaching, has proved its effect in developing learners' target language in classroom. So therefore, and as speaking skills is one of the most important skill to be acquired, it was conducted in this research. Let's start with task-based language teaching. As I previously said, TBLT, or task-based language teaching, is known as an approach which developed as a version of communicative language teaching. TBLT is one of the methods which shifted EFL classrooms from form focus and teaching center environment to meaning focus, authentic material use in classrooms, and real life interaction in classroom. It is based on the belief that meaningful interaction will result in the subconscious acquisition of all aspects of language, where form is learned or taught in a passive way. Before the classroom, or before students focus on form. The meaningful communication here is seen as a way to encourage learners to communicate using the target language. During the meaningful communication, learners will try to use several language strategies to deliver their message or ideas. For instance, giving examples, retelling their ideas. So this is believed to give students different opportunities to experience whatever language they know to communicate and speak in the language. Firstly, it gives the student a chance to use their own knowledge of the target language when interacting in classroom. It also provides the student with different opportunities to monitor their own and other learners' errors while communicating, and avoid those errors when communicating outside the classrooms. However, some researchers noted that some learners may acquire their peers' errors when communicating in classrooms. So the task, what is the task? The task is the main teaching unit, which is referred to a specific type of activity which is mainly used in classroom. However, there isn't an agreement among researchers on one main definition of a task. For example, Long defined it as a piece of work undertaken for oneself or for others, freely or for some rewards. Thus, examples of tasks include painting a fence, dressing a child, filling a form. In other words, by a task is meant the 101 things people do in everyday life, at work, at play, and in between. Other researchers defined it as an activity which required learners to arrive at an outcome from giving information through some process of thought, and which allowed teachers to control and regulate the process. Another definition is a piece of classroom work which involves learners in comprehending, manipulating, producing, or interacting in the target language, while their attention is principally focused on meaning rather than form. Whereas researchers such as Skayan defined task from its criteria. So it was defined as an activity which meaning is primary. There are some sort of relationship to real world. Task completion has some priority, and the assessment of task performance is in terms of task outcome. In this research, I followed Skayan definition, which was also viewed task from its criteria. So TPLT framework. This approach can be delivered by different or by teachers through a fixed framework, which is pre-task, task cycle, and post-task. Before looking at this framework, it is important to say that TPLT framework is, or researchers delivered TPLT from different frameworks, such as Illes and Long. In this research, I followed Willis and Willis framework, that is pre-task, task cycle, and post-task. So let's start with the pre-task phase. At the pre-task phase, the teacher introduced the topic, apply activities to assist learners to learn or recall useful words and phrases, ensure learners' understanding of the task, and may play a record of other learners doing the same task but without giving learners the outcome or the results of the task. While learners may note down useful or new words and phrases from the recording or pre-task activity. They may spend some time to prepare for the task, either individually or in groups. So no language focus at this stage. Secondly, the task cycle stage, which is the second phase, is divided into three stages based on Willis and Willis framework. So the task cycle phase is divided into the task, planning, and the report stage. At the first stage, that is the task stage, learners should complete the task in small groups or in pairs, while the teacher should only monitor learners' progress and encourage them without interference. The main point of this stage is fluency and task completion. The second stage in the task cycle phase is the planning. According to Willis and Willis, at this stage, learners should prepare for the last stage, that is the report. Rehears what they will say at the report stage, or they will read. They should focus on fluency and accuracy, and also in producing more complex language, but of course without focusing on form. Whereas the teacher role is to ensure that the purpose of the report is clear. Act as a language advisor and help learners to rehearse oral or written report. Finally, the report stage, according to Willis and Willis, at this stage, learners should present their written or spoken report, while the teacher may give pre-feedback on the content of the form. They may also play a recording of other people completing similar tasks. Finally, the last stage, the post-task phase. So this is also called focus on form stage. So this stage should be the focus on form stage. According to Willis and Willis, this stage is divided into two stages. The first is the analysis and the second is the practice stage. At the first stage, the analysis stage, learners should do consciousness raising activities by analyzing the language used in the text they have read at the first stage or first phase, or they may read a text or transcripts of a record they heard. They may also ask about any other features which they came across, whereas the teacher should review each analysis activity with the class, explain them, and may bring other useful words or phrases to learners' attention. Finally, the practice stage. At this stage, teacher may conduct practice activities, and learners should practice words, phrases, patterns from the analysis activity. Also practice other features which they have noticed in the text. Finally, they may take notes of useful language items. Research methods. As you can see, pre and post speaking test and an interview. Pre and post speaking tests were collected from two groups, control and experimental group. The control group followed the conventional teaching method, whereas the experimental group followed TBLT for 3 months. And then learners were interviewed to find out their attitude toward TBLT. Data analysis. So as we said, learners were examined before and after experimenting TBLT to find out the results or the effect of TBLT. The results were measured based on CAF framework, that is complexity, accuracy, and fluency. Firstly, the results of the accuracy showed that learners have significantly developed their accuracy, whereas the results of the complexity showed that learners decreased their level of complexity. Finally, fluency. Learners showed significant development in their fluency. However, the filled pauses hasn't significantly decreased after the TBLT. Learners' attitude toward TBLT. Almost all learners have a positive attitude toward TBLT. They agreed that it is encourage them to interact in real life interaction and encourage them to meaningfully interact when completing a task. Thank you for listening.